In a previous mini-lecture, I discussed assessing fluency and tried to differentiate assessing fluency from assessing complexity or assessing accuracy. In this mini-lecture, I'm going to talk about other aspects of oral communication that could be assessed at the same time that we assess fluency. There are some other things that we might not strictly call oral fluency, but which might be most easily assessed alongside of it. Most of these things would fall under an area of linguistics called Discourse Pragmatics. I'm going to avoid any long explanations, but some things you might assess would include turn-taking, back-channeling, conversational cooperativeness, and register. Now, for turn-taking, a good test should include some opportunities for some back and forth, and you should be able to assess how well the test taker managed these turns. A descriptor you could use on an assessment might be manages turns effectively. And what effectively might be will vary widely on depending what kind of interaction we're having. Obviously, turn-taking in a lecture is different than turn-taking in a conversation, and the type of conversation would matter again as well. Back-channeling. A good listener back-channels. This is to say that a good listener gives small indicators that he or she is listening and understanding. Now, a good spouse pretends to be listening by back-channeling. A good test taker would probably actively listen by back-channeling. Conversational cooperativeness. Now, if you took a course in linguistics in university, you probably remember the Gricean maxims. And personally, I think they're kind of fun. I've recorded some other mini lectures where I discuss Gricean maxims in some more detail. In short, though, these maxims teach us that cooperative speakers make their answers informative, true, relevant, brief, and orderly. It might be hard to verify whether answers are true, but we could pull a descriptor or two from this, such as responses were informative and relevant, or responses were brief and orderly. In order to allow you to ascertain this, the assessment should probably include some listening and some speaking, so that we can assess whether the responses were meaningful and connected to what was said previously, and this would be necessary in order to assess turn-taking as well. So finally, register. Here we're talking about an appropriate level of politeness, and I'll leave it up to you to decide what kind of register is appropriate and polite for the examination that you're giving. My only advice here is to choose the register you would like to see from the test takers and try to assess that register, that level of politeness, and indicate that the register that you want to see through your own conduct during the interview or assessment. You kind of will push a certain register on the test taker by the way in which you greet them at the door, whether you call them in by their first name or by their title and last name, by the level of formality that you show to them. This will help them to determine what level of formality you might be expecting. I think this is the only way, because there really isn't a culture of the language test interview for the test taker to refer to. We're all just bringing our own expectations to some degree into this testing context. So a descriptor here might be register was appropriate, and make sure that your assessors know what is meant by appropriate. And again, keeping in mind that if you're going to assess their appropriateness, then you need to be watching yours through your body language, your interactions, and the test environment. All of these things should be communicating to them what you consider appropriateness to be. So several descriptors I would suggest, and these go along with descriptors suggested in a previous video lecture. Speaks at an appropriate pace. Turn-taking is managed effectively. Responses were informative and relevant. Responses were brief and orderly, and register was appropriate. I think taken with the descriptors that I mentioned in my previous lecture on assessing fluency, together we have the beginnings of a discussion of what an assessment of fluency might look like. So, some questions to test yourself if you're taking this as part of my course or one of my courses. Is it important to include descriptors measuring discourse pragmatics in a second language assessment? If someone is a good conversationalist in his or her first language, wouldn't those skills simply transfer to the second? And can you think of an example of discourse pragmatics that might be different between languages? The more specific your example is, the better. So that's all I have to say on this topic. Check out other related mini lectures on ways in which fluency might be constrained under test conditions, and check out the mini lectures on the Gricean maxims and assessing fluency. Ta-ta for now.